Are you the last generation of pure humans? Oh, okay. I know that sounds like something straight out of science fiction, but seriously, stick with me for a sec. The articles and ideas you guys sent in this time, they really got us thinking about some seriously huge questions about the future of humanity and really maybe even just like what it means to be human, you know?
It's interesting, isn't it? We're not just talking about robots taking over the world or anything. These sources, they tap into something deeper, don't they? Like real anxieties and hopes about how technology is shaping us, how it defines us even.
Exactly. So today we're going to be looking at that blurry line between biology and tech, meeting some real people who are pushing those boundaries, and yeah, we're going to be asking those big philosophical questions about identity. You ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's unpack this idea of the last generation of pure humans. One of the sources you sent in, it asks if we're at the very beginning of a brand new chapter for our species.
Okay, so I have to admit, the speed of technological change these days is kind of dizzying. Makes you wonder, where does the human end and the tech begin?
That's the core of it all, isn't it? And it's not just one single invention. It's brain-computer interfaces, CRISPR gene editing, AI that's getting more sophisticated by the day. They're all pushing us to rethink what's natural.
So picture this. You walk into a coffee shop, the barista's taking your order, and they have a chip implanted in their brain that lets them control machines with their thoughts. Sound like science fiction to you?
Not quite. That's something that Kevin Warwick has actually experimented with. He's also known as Captain Cyborg. He's had implants that let him control robotic arms just by thinking.
Wait, this is for real. People are already doing this. And he's not alone, right? This whole biohacking thing is an actual movement.
It is. You actually sent us some articles about other biohackers pushing the boundaries, like what our bodies can do with tech. Like there's Amal Grafstra. He uses implanted chips to replace keys and passwords.
Oh, yeah. So no more digging for your keys. You just wave your hand. That's pretty cool. I remember reading about that. It was fascinating. And there was that artist, Neil Harbison, right? The one who can hear color.
Yes. Neil Harbison is colorblind, but he has an antenna implant that allows him to experience color as sound. And this brings up a really interesting question that your sources keep coming back to. Where do we draw the line? Are these individuals still purely human, or have they become something new?
That's a great question. It really makes you think. What would you consider the dividing line? And how about you listening? Where would you draw that line?
It's tricky, right? The sources don't pretend to have all the answers, but they really encourage us to think about these complexities. Implants are one thing, but what about actually rewriting our DNA?
Okay, now we're getting into some seriously next level stuff. You mentioned CRISPR earlier. One of the sources describes it as like molecular scissors that can edit genes.
Yeah. Think of it this way. CRISPR allows scientists to cut and paste sections of DNA with incredible accuracy. It really could revolutionize medicine. One of the articles you sent in, it argues that CRISPR could eliminate inherited diseases entirely.
Well, hold on. So you're saying things like cystic fibrosis, Huntington's disease, they could become a thing of the past.
Exactly.
That's amazing. But on the other hand, there was another article you shared that argues CRISPR could lead to designer babies, where parents can choose their children's traits like intelligence, athletic ability, even eye color. It's like something out of a movie.
Exactly. And that's where the ethical considerations really come in. Your source material, it really grapples with this, doesn't it? Would it even be ethical to choose a child's traits? Wouldn't that create a whole new level of inequality? Could we be reducing human identity to just a set of genes?
It's like a fork in the road. One path leads to these incredible medical breakthroughs, and the other to a potential dystopia. What do you think listening? Would you use CRISPR to eliminate a genetic disease in your child? Where do you draw the line?
It's tough. These aren't easy questions, and the sources reflect that. But they're definitely important to think about now, while these technologies are still being developed.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to get lost in the what-ifs and all the philosophical debates. But how does all this actually play out in real life? Are we talking about like a sudden shift, or is it more gradual?
That's a great question, and it's something your sources definitely address. Some experts believe that these changes might be so subtle at first that we hardly even notice them. I mean, think about it. How much do we already rely on our smartphones? They've practically become like extensions of ourselves in just a few years.
That's true. I mean, I remember when smartphones first came out, they seemed so futuristic back then. Now I can't imagine life without one. Are you suggesting that these other advancements, they might follow a similar path, like go from being extraordinary to ordinary in the blink of an eye?
It's definitely a possibility. Look at fitness trackers. A few years ago, they were a novelty. Now they're everywhere you see them. Or think about those biohackers we talked about earlier. They might seem fringe now, but they could be the forerunners of what becomes totally commonplace in the future.
Okay, so maybe it's not about some like dramatic before and after scenario. Maybe it's more of a gradual evolution with tech kind of slowly becoming more and more integrated into our lives
Okay.
until we can't even tell where we end and the tech begins.
Exactly. And as those lines get blurrier, that fundamental question of what it means to be human, it gets even more complex, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about our biology anymore.
So even if we start enhancing our bodies and minds with technology, there's got to be more to being human than just our physical form.
Right.
There's our culture, our values, our experiences. Those things are still important.
Absolutely. And the choices we make about how we use technology, they're a reflection of those values, aren't they? It's not just about what we can do, but what we should do. What kind of future do we want to build?
It's like we're writing the next chapter of human evolution. But this time we actually have a say in how the story unfolds.
And with that power comes a huge responsibility. One of your sources, it really highlights this, the need to carefully consider the potential consequences, intended or unintended, of the choices that we make today.
It can feel kind of overwhelming, can't it? Like, where do we even begin? How do we, as individuals, start thinking about these massive questions? And how do our individual choices actually make a difference?
It starts with awareness, I think, by having conversations like this one, by questioning our assumptions, challenging easy answers, and considering different perspectives. Your sources really encourage this, engaging with these topics and not shying away from the complexity.
So it's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Because some of these questions just don't have simple black and white answers.
Exactly. It's about embracing nuance, acknowledging uncertainty, and being open to learning and evolving our understanding. Another source you shared, it emphasizes that the future isn't predetermined. It's shaped by the actions that we take today, both individually and collectively.
So even small choices matter. Like the apps we use, the news we read, the conversations we have, those things all contribute to the direction we're heading.
That's right. It's about being conscious consumers, critical thinkers, and engaged citizens. One of your sources asks, how does this technology align with my values? What are the potential unintended consequences?
Yeah.
Am I helping to create a future I want to see? Those are all questions worth asking ourselves, I think, regularly.
Okay. That makes it feel a little less daunting.
Yeah.
It's not about having all the answers right now, but about asking the right questions and remembering that this isn't just about tech for tech's sake. It's about the kind of world we want to build, the kind of society we want to live in.
Yes. And one of your sources, it paints this fascinating picture of how these technologies could change our cities. As our world becomes more urban, we might see adaptations that help us to thrive in those environments.
Like what? Give me an example. How could humans adapt to urban living?
Well, think about things like enhanced memory, to navigate complex city layouts, or heightened senses, to deal with the constant stimulation, or maybe even a boosted ability to multitask and process information quickly in a fast-paced environment. These adaptations, they could give people a real advantage in a crowded city.
That's interesting. I can see how those abilities would be useful. But what about the downsides? Wouldn't that raise concerns about privacy and control? Like imagine a city where your every move, even your thoughts and emotions, are being tracked and analyzed.
That's a very valid concern. Your sources highlight that. The potential ethical pitfalls of these technologies. As we gain the ability to enhance our cognitive and emotional capabilities, we need to be extremely careful about the implications. For individual autonomy and freedom,
It's like walking a tightrope, isn't it? On one side, you've got the potential for incredible advancements, but on the other, there's the risk of unintended consequences and even misuse. Seems like there's a lot of potential for things to go wrong.
there is. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations now, before these technologies become so widespread that we can't control them anymore. One of your sources.
Yeah.
It emphasizes the need for a much broader conversation about these issues. It can't just be scientists and tech companies making these decisions. We need ethicists, philosophers, policymakers, artists, everyday citizens. Everyone needs to be involved.
It's like we need a whole new rule book for this brave new world. What are some of the key things we should be thinking about? What red flags should we be watching out for?
One major concern highlighted in your sources is the potential for inequality. If access to these enhancements is determined by wealth or privilege, the gap between the haves and the have-nots could become even wider. Imagine a world where the wealthy can afford to enhance their intelligence, their lifespan, their physical abilities, while the rest of us are left behind, struggling to even keep up.
That's a chilling thought. And it's not just about access to the technology itself. It's about who gets to decide what enhancements are even desirable, what traits are considered better or more valuable. Would we even want to live in a world where human worth is measured by a set of enhanced abilities?
That's a really profound question. Do we value diversity, difference, the full spectrum of human experience? Or do we risk creating a society where everyone conforms to this narrow definition of ideal?
It's a lot to unpack. And it's not just about individuals either. How do we even begin to govern these technologies? How do we make sure they're used ethically and responsibly?
That's where the need for a broader discussion becomes even more critical. One of your sources suggests looking to our existing values and principles as a starting point. How can we apply those values to this new reality? How do we ensure that human dignity, equality, and justice remain at the forefront as we navigate these uncharted waters?
It's a huge challenge, but also an exciting one. After all, we're talking about the future of humanity. What could be more important than that?
Exactly. And while there are definitely risks and challenges, your sources also highlight the potential for positive change. Imagine a world where we can eliminate diseases, enhance our ability to connect and empathize with each other, and create a more just and equitable society.
Okay, now I'm starting to see the other side of the coin. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. It could be a story of a hope and progress.
That's the spirit. We shouldn't let fear paralyze us. We need to be open to the possibilities, while also being aware of the potential pitfalls. And it's important to remember, as one of your sources emphasizes, this isn't just a conversation for experts or futurists, it's a conversation that everyone needs to be a part of.
We all have a role to play in shaping the future. And the choices we make, even seemingly small ones, can have a ripple effect. We've talked about a lot in this section. From the gradual integration of tech into our lives, to the ethical questions we need to address. But there's one question I keep coming back to. What if we actually do become something more than human? What if we evolve into a new species altogether?
That's a question that takes us into the realm of speculation, but it's also a question that's worth exploring. After all, it forces us to confront our assumptions about what it even means to be human in the first place.
We'll be back in just a moment to delve into that very question. Could we be on the verge of something entirely new? Something that goes beyond our current understanding of ourselves? Stay tuned, because this is where things get really interesting. All right, we're back, and ready to really dive into some mind-bending concepts here. Before the break, we were talking about the possibility of humans actually evolving into something entirely new, something beyond what we currently understand as human.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, isn't it? It's funny how science fiction often kind of foreshadows scientific reality. Like, people used to think flying was pure fantasy, or talking to someone across an ocean. And look at us now. So it's not totally out there to ask, what if the next step for humanity isn't just about enhancing ourselves? What if it's about transcending our current form altogether?
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So are we talking about humans like merging with machines? Or developing totally new senses and abilities? Could we even leave our physical bodies behind and exist as pure consciousness? I mean, where do your sources take this idea?
Well, one of your sources explores this concept called transhumanism. It's this whole movement that believes that technology can and should be used to overcome human limitations, including things like aging and even death. They envision a future where we basically merge with technology, enhancing our physical and cognitive abilities to the point where we become something fundamentally different.
Whoa. Okay, that's a lot to take in. I'm trying to picture what a transhuman would even look like. Would we even be recognizable as human anymore?
It's hard to say for sure, but your sources get into some pretty wild scenarios, like uploading our consciousness into digital realms, or creating entirely new senses that let us perceive realities that are beyond our current comprehension.
Okay, now my head is really spinning. But even if we could achieve those things, what would be the point? What would drive us to go beyond human?
That's a great question, and it's something your sources really wrestle with. Some argue that it's about reaching our full potential as a species, overcoming our limitations, expanding our consciousness. Others see it as like a natural progression, the next step in our evolutionary journey.
I can see that. But isn't there a risk of losing something essential along the way? Like, what happens to our values, our empathy, our sense of humanity, if we become so different from what we are now?
You're hitting on a really key ethical concern there that's brought up a lot in your sources. If we pursue transhumanism, we need to think really carefully about what aspects of our humanity we want to preserve. and how we can make sure those values are carried forward. It's not just about technological advancement, it's about ethical evolution as well.
I'm also thinking back to something you mentioned earlier about the potential for inequality. If these radical enhancements are super expensive, wouldn't that create an even bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots? Could we end up with a society where a select few become transhuman, while the rest of us are left behind just struggling to keep up?
That's a very real concern, and it's something your sources address head-on. One of them even uses the term bioapartheid to describe that potential scenario, where enhanced humans basically form a new elite, separating themselves from the rest of humanity. Yeah, it's a disturbing thought. It raises all these questions about access and justice, and even the very definition of humanity in a transhumanist world.
It's like a science fiction dystopia coming to life. But let's shift gears for a second. You mentioned earlier that some people see the merging of humans and AI as like the next big step. Did your sources go into that at all?
Yeah, they did. One of your sources talks about the concept of the singularity. It's this hypothetical point where artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence. And it could potentially lead to this explosion of technological advancement that completely reshapes civilization as we know it.
Okay, hold on. Back up for a sec. What does singularity actually mean in this context? It's one of those terms I've heard, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure I totally get it.
Think of it this way. We're constantly improving computer processing power. AI capabilities are getting better all the time. The singularity is this theoretical point where AI becomes so intelligent that it can basically design and improve itself at an exponential rate, quickly surpassing human intelligence.
So AI becomes super intelligent and starts evolving on its own, potentially leaving us humans in the dust. That's both fascinating and a little terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And your sources really reflect that mix of awe and apprehension. Some see the singularity as a potential utopia, where this super intelligent AI solves all our biggest problems, like disease, poverty, climate change. But others warn about the risks, like suggesting that the super intelligent AI might not even value human life or see us as necessary. We could become irrelevant or worse, a hindrance to its goals.
It's like we're back in that sci-fi movie scenario where the machines take over. But before we get too carried away with all these possibilities, let's come back down to earth for a bit. One of your sources talked about how humans might adapt to city living. What would those adaptations actually look like? And how might they change us?
Yeah, that source paints this really interesting picture of future humans evolving to thrive in these megacities. Imagine people with enhanced spatial awareness to navigate dense crowds, or heightened senses to filter out all the noise and visual overload, and even increased cognitive flexibility to adapt to the constant change and stimulation of urban environments. These adaptations would be like superpowers for city dwellers.
I see what you mean. That makes sense. But wouldn't that create even more division between people who live in cities and those who don't? It's like we'd be evolving in different directions.
That's a really interesting point that the source brings up. Evolution isn't always uniform across an entire species. Different environments and pressures can lead to different adaptations. It's possible we could see a diversification of humanity, with different groups evolving in response to their specific circumstances. We might even see adaptations for space travel or living underwater as we push the boundaries of exploration and habitation.
Okay, now my head is officially spinning. We've gone from enhanced humans to super intelligent AI to multiple branches of human evolution. It's a lot to process. But here's the big question. Even if we evolve into something beyond our current understanding, would we still be human in any meaningful sense? What would connect us to our past, to all the humans who came before us?
That is a really profound question, and it gets to the heart of what your sources are exploring. What is the essence of being human? Is it our biology, our consciousness, our capacity for love, compassion, creativity? Or is there something even more fundamental that transcends our physical form and even our current cognitive limitations?
I don't know if there's a single answer to that question, but I think it's a question we need to keep asking ourselves as we move forward. Because no matter how much we change, how much we evolve, we don't want to lose sight of what makes us human in the first place.
I love that. And one of your sources really emphasizes that point. It suggests that the journey of human evolution isn't just about physical or technological changes. It's about the evolution of our consciousness, our values, our understanding of what it means to exist in this universe. It's not just about what we become, but who we become.
That's a powerful message. It's a little daunting, too. How do we even begin to prepare for a future that's so uncertain, so full of possibilities?
Well, one of your sources offers a really simple but profound suggestion. The best way to prepare for the future is to embrace the present, to cultivate those qualities we most value about being human. Curiosity, compassion, creativity, resilience, and the ability to connect with each other and the world around us. Those are the qualities that will help us navigate whatever challenges and opportunities lie ahead, no matter what form humanity takes.
That's beautiful. It's not about trying to control the future, but about fostering those inner strengths. That will allow us to adapt, learn, and grow, no matter what the future brings.
Exactly. And remember, evolution is a journey, not a destination. There will always be new horizons to explore, new challenges to overcome, and new possibilities to embrace. And along the way, we'll continue to ask those big questions. Who are we? Where are we going? And what does it truly mean to be human?
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. We started with the idea of the last generation of pure humans and ended up exploring the very nature of humanity and the potential for us to evolve into something entirely new. It's been a truly mind-expanding experience.
It really has. And as we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave you with this thought. The future isn't something that happens to us. It's something we create. The choices we make today, individually and collectively, will shape the course of human evolution. So let's choose wisely, with compassion, courage, and an unwavering commitment to the values that we hold most dear.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. And to all of you listening, we encourage you to continue the conversation. What are your hopes and fears for the future? What kind of world do you want to create for yourselves and for generations to come? The future is in our hands. Let's make it a future worthy of our shared humanity.